Okay, so one thing that is new here is the internet doesn't work at all. So we'll have to do this in a not live way for the first time. But that's no problem. So where we left off was this card from Adam Paquette that is really strong and showed us the next way that sagas will work, which means that you will have to read the top left text for the first time. So what this says is read ahead, and you will have to check the sagas whether this says read ahead or not. Because when it says that, you can choose to start at the third saga, which is to put 2 non-saga permanent cards from your hand onto the battlefield. So if you have something strong or 2 strong things in your hand already, you will want to choose to start it there. But if you want to look for the strong card still, then you will choose the first or the second, maybe if you want to guess, saga, and then you look at the top 7 cards of your library and you may reveal 1 non-saga permanent card from among them and put it into your hand. So maybe basically what you want to do is say, I have 0 important cards yet, so I want to start at chapter 1. I have 1 important card that I want to get in, so I start at chapter 2, or I have 2, or I only want the 1 on the battlefield and I start with saga 3. So that's really interesting, and there will be a lot of interesting sagas with that, but you will have to read the whole card. Moving on, the new Phyrexian, the second Phyrexian Planeswalker that we have seen is Ajani, Sleeper Agent. So this is a 4 mana or 3 mana and 2 life Planeswalker that comes in with 4 loyalty. But what the completed mechanic also says, if you pay 3 mana and 2 life, you only get 2 loyalty. So what does he do? Reveal the top card of your library for his +1. If it's a creature or planeswalker card, put it into your hand. Otherwise, you may put it onto the bottom of your library. So you look at the top 2 and then put a creature into your hand, basically. The -3 says put 3 +1 counters among up to 3 target creatures, and they gain Vigilance, which is strong because Vigilance is a strong ability that helps you break through walls while you keep yours up. Then the -6, which is doable if you pay the 4, you get an emblem with whenever you cast a creature or planeswalker spell, target opponent gets 2 poison counters. So what does that mean? When you get, I believe, 10 poison counters, I'm not sure anymore, but then you get to die, actually. So that's not good. You need to watch out, and that is pretty easy to do, because getting 5 creatures into the battlefield, which can also be, which can only be cast, so but still easy. That's pretty easy to do. Then there are some other arts as well. 3 more arts. We see this one, which is a bit of an ambiguous Ajani. Then we see this one where he is definitely on the side of the Phyrexians. We see this one, which is a really good side of Ajani still, as we want to remember him. And then this one, which definitely bad again. Moving on to Joda the Unifier, who has been collecting people, collecting elves and stuff, and has put them in touch with the humans. He says 5 mana for a 5/5, but you have to use Wooburg exactly for that. Legendary creatures you control get +X, where X is the number of legendary creatures you control. So that can get out of control really fast, and he is the lord of everyone, so he will help everyone as well. Whenever you cast a legendary spell from your hand, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a legendary non-land card with lesser mana value. So it is a sort of overflow. No, I'm not sure what's called, but you get more cards onto the battlefield anyways, and you care more about the amount of legendaries than which legendaries they are. Maybe you do. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So interesting that it does that for legendary alone. Then we move on to Rith, Liberated Primeval, which is a 5/5 5 mana dragon with War 2 again. We have seen that before with the 5 mana 5/5 flyers in the set. Other dragons you control also get War 2, And then at the beginning of your end step, if a creature or planeswalker an opponent controlled was dealt excess damage, so sort of trample, this turn, but can also be from spells, create a 4/4 with flying. So that is only at the beginning of your end step, so you will get a 4/4 every one of your turns. I hope. I hope your deck is built for that with this card. Then Shanna, Purifying Blade, is a green, white, blue or banned creature, a human warrior with lifelink, a 3/3. At the beginning of your end step, you may pay X. If you do, draw X cards. X can't be greater than the amount of life you gained this turn. So what does that mean? You almost get as many cards as you gain life, but you do have to pay as much mana as well. So Shanna, Purifying Blade, why is she called this? Well, in the story, the main part that she plays in, she has to fight her nightmares. And that is what we see here. She's fighting her nightmares, or at least the braids of them. Shanna had heard Sesay's legend all of her life. Now it was her time to forge her own. So she has been having problems with the fact that so many legendary people have gone before her, and now she has become her own legendary, which she already was, but now she really is legendary. Solkanar the Tainted is a Grixis 5 mana elemental demon. A 5/5 again, maybe that's a theme. At the beginning of your end step, choose one that hasn't been chosen yet, so you get to go over all 4 of these things over 4 turns. You draw a card, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Solkanar deals 3 damage to up to 1 target creature or planeswalker, or you exile it and then return it to the battlefield under an opponent's control. That is interesting because this means that maybe this is a strong 5/5 for 5, but after you drew a card, trained your opponents and dealt 3 damage to up to 1 target creature, you might better sacrifice this or something, because otherwise your opponents will get it. Or maybe you want to do that. That might be fun too, but you probably want to sacrifice this, which is really easy to do in black and red colors. Soul of Windgrace. So Windgrace isn't here apparently. He has his soul sent to battle for him. This is a 4 mana 5/4 cat avatar, so it does count as a cat if you have a Jaunt cat deck, but that is probably not the case. Whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, you may put a land card from your graveyard onto the battlefield tapped under your control. It does not seem to care for how many lands you have played. Then you can discard lands and pay either a green, 1 and a red, or 2 and a black to gain 3 life, draw a card, or give Windgrace indestructible and tap it. So you can save it with these lands, so that is strong. And every time you can attack with a 4/4 as well. But if they don't kill your 5/4, you get to draw a card or gain 3 life. So those are incremental effects again. So I feel like they have changed some things about design, and they want to be more slow and steady with their cards instead of huge and explosive maybe. But they do seem fun. Then Zur returns the Eternal Schemer. Apparently he cannot die. A 3 mana white, blue and black Esper, flying 1/4. Enchantment creatures you control have Death Touch, Lifelink, and I think most importantly Hexproof. Then target non-aura enchantment you control becomes a creature. So it becomes an enchantment creature. And has base power and toughness, each equal to its mana value, which can be a lot with enchantments. So this guy really wants to help you turn your enchantments into creatures with Death Touch and Lifelink and Hexproof. So that's interesting. You can also use this ability, by the way, I just thought of that, to save your enchantments if it's being targeted. So then you can make it a creature. So that's interesting too. Karn Cylex, this is an artifact that the whole story is about. They want to save this artifact and then it gets stolen anyways. It ends tapped for 3 mana, and then players can't pay life to cast spells or to activate abilities that aren't mana abilities. This doesn't have flash, so that is a little bit clunky. You won't be able to use it as an answer to Bolus's Citadel, for example, or cards like that. And then it has an X ability, which works with Karn, who makes a lot of power stones that can tap for colorless mana. Exile it to destroy each non-land permanent with mana value X or less. So that is strong because you can do this at any time with the amount of mana that you hold open without destroying most of your most important creatures and stuff. But this is dangerous because this is a board wipe that you have to use on your own turn. You have to activate it as a sorcery, and your opponents will attack you for it until you use this. We have seen this with the artifact that you only have to tap for 1 mana, and this one is a little bit clunkier as well. So I don't think this will be too disruptive in multiplayer formats, but it might be really disruptive in single player formats because you will always attack your opponents if you can. Then we have a new Lotus, a 5 mana one, but this one is timeless, so it's a sort of legendary one that taps for 5 mana because legendaries are in the 5 color theme. Urza exploited nature to power his war machines. In time, nature exploded the war machines to renew itself, apparently getting some of all of the colors of mana out of this war machine. Then we see that the Weatherlight is completed. This seems weird, but the Weatherlight is alive, so it can be completed, which is an interesting thought. I thought they were like, oh, that's an interesting thought. That is really clever of us. Let's do it. And didn't think about our hearts. It's a 2 mana flying vehicle. That's a 5/5, so that's really strong. So there has to be a high crew cost, right? As long as Weatherlight completed has 4 or more Pheresis counters on it, it's a Phyrexian creature in addition to its other types. Okay, so you need to get 4 of those counters on it. Whenever a creature you control dies, put a Pheresis counter on Weatherlight completed. So that's because it got completed when almost all of its crew died. Then draw a card if it has 7 or more Pheresis counters on it. Whenever a creature dies, so when 7 creatures have died, you start to draw cards. If it doesn't, you scry 1 every time a creature dies. So that is still really strong for a 2 mana artifact. So this is I think the most insane card, and it will go in every deck ever. Cool. That was it for the mythics. Let's go on to the rares anyways. Rare. Starting with Anointed Peacekeeper. This is a really strong card that lets you look at one opponent's card and then you choose any card name. It can be one on the battlefield as well. And then spells your opponent cast with the chosen name cost 2 more to cast. So sort of already the spell thief kind of ability. And then activated abilities of sources with the chosen name also cost 2 more to activate. So you can really stop cards that are on the battlefield as well. And this works for all of your opponents as well. And I think the last ability also works for you. It seems that way. Alright, Archangel of Wrath. A 4 mana angel at 3/4 again, so white really has the 4 mana 3/4 game unlock. This one comes from Achroma, Archangel of Wrath. And we see the colors of Wrath here as well. So Wraths are also board wipes, so those are white, black and red in Magic the Gathering. It also has flying and lifelink, and then you can kicker it twice, so with 1 black and 1 red mana you can deal 2 damage according to how many times you have kicked this card. Interesting. Double kicker is also really interesting because it might have some synergies, new synergies with kicker cards. Here we have Denitha, Bernalia's Hope, a 5 mana human knight. That's a 4/4 with first strike and vigilance, which is the strong part, but then also gains you life, so it can be a really swingy card as well. She wants to be stronger because she has first strike and vigilance, so that her power really is important to her. And then when she enters the battlefield, you may put an aura or equipment card from your hand or graveyard onto the battlefield attached to Denitha. Those can be the big 7 cost equip cards as well. So you can really use this to kill your opponents on turn 6. I assume that you are going to do that. Then we have the first card of a rare cycle, which is the Defiler cycle. It's not the Eldrazi one. It's only from the Phyrexians only, as if that is not bad enough. Then what these do is for their color, they say as an additional cost to cast a permanent of this color. This effect reduces its mana cost by 1 if you pay 2 life. So you can sort of pay a fraction cost for it, and they didn't want to put the fraction cost on a lot of cards, I think, in the set. That's what this means. Then they also have a secondary ability that triggers when you pay or when you cast one of those colored spells. This one creates 1/1s. Together with a 5 mana 5/5 with Vigilance, that's pretty insane. Definitely in this color that doesn't usually get such big creatures. Again, we see the wisps of Magali as well, which is really beautiful, with his hand at the moon, defiling faith. Defiling the people's faith in sort of the heavens, I think is what this point said. Then Guardian of New Bernalia is a 2 mana human soldier, where a mother figure is with a child. She can enlist her own child to fight with her, which is a bit weird. What this means is, as this creature attacks, you may tap another creature to stand behind them, probably, to give them power. So that is why this is the case for her child. And then whenever she enlists a creature, you scry 2, so she gets knowledge for some reason. Then you can also discard a card, and this human soldier with her big shield becomes indestructible. And you tap it. Leyline Binding is interesting because we see a Phyrexian being bound by the literal 5 mana of the land. Domain again, this time your spell costs less for every basic land you have. This also has flash, and then when it enters, exile target non-land permanent an opponent controls until it leaves the battlefield. So Domain says that you do have to use a basic land type from among lands you control. So one thing that really helps with that is the dual lands, the new dual lands with the that are, for example, plains and islands. I think that is why they put that in this set. Temporary Lockdown is a 3 mana enchantment that ends the battlefield, and you get to exile each non-land permanent with mana value 2 or less, so also from your opponents, until it leaves the battlefield. Perhaps you want to exile a lot of Soul Rings, for example. Any one of us could be compromised, said Karn. No one leaves until we know who can be trusted. And this is interesting. You see 5 characters and one of them will be completed later. Ursa Assembles the Titans is a really insane read-ahead saga as well. So again, let's start with the last one so that we can see why you would start with it. You may activate the loyalty abilities of planeswalkers you control twice this turn rather than only once. So why would you do this at once? Because you can sort of surprise your opponents with an ultimate maybe. So that is why that is strong. Then the second chapter is you may put a planeswalker card with mana value 6 or less from your hand onto the battlefield. That is interesting because perhaps you will be able to already play your strong planeswalker if you already had it in your hand. And then the first one looks for it again. So we see that the design space of the first chapter being looking for your card, and the second or last playing it out of your hand for free. The first chapter says scry 4, then you may reveal the top card of your library. If it's a planeswalker, put it into your hand. So you can scry and look for 2 important or 1 important planeswalker, and you may play that. Apparently, you might want to use this, for example, on Ajani, who will then immediately be a 6 mana planeswalker that your opponents will have to attack. Valiant Veteran is the last white card. As we saw, it is from another cycle, and this time white is the worst one. Other soldiers you control get +1/+1. That is really selective if you have a lot of soldiers that could be strong. It says in the flavor, let them come, we will show them that Argivian steel is stronger than any Phyrexian metal. You can exile this from your graveyard to put +1 counts on each soldier you have. So maybe if you have a really strong soldier deck, you want to play this, then this is really strong. Otherwise, it's not. Moving on to blue. Academy Lore Master is a 2 mana 2/3. That's a strong stat line to have. At the beginning of each player's draw step, that player may draw an additional card, but their spells will cost 2 more to cast. If you have a deck where you have a lot of instants, you can yourself not be restricted by this and draw extra cards from Academy Lore Master, while you are not restricted by the 2 extra mana because you will play on your opponent's turns. As a young student, she dusted the shelves of Teleria's great library. Now she writes the books that lined them. Cool. She's a new lore master. Aether Channeler is a 3-mana 2/1 that enters, and you can either make a 1/1 bird with flying, of course, return a target non-land permanent to its owner's hand, so bounce, or draw a card. Really flexible, and I think therefore this will be really strong. Defiler of Dreams, a 5-mana card from the cycle of the Defilers, yes. This one is a 4/3 with flying, so already stronger than the Soldier, I think. So as an additional cost, you may then... oh wait, this is not from that cycle. This is from the card where the 5-mana white card was strong because it was a 5/5 Vigilance. This is a 4/3 flying, so I think that's a little bit worse as a stat line actually. But it does the same thing with blue cards, sort of making them cheaper if you pay 2 life. Then whenever you cast a blue permanent, you draw a card, so that is better than a 1/1, I'd say. Haughty Djinn is a Haughty Djinn. It's a 3-mana with flying, and Djinns have the gimmick of becoming stronger because of something. The previous one became stronger because of lands, and that made him really strong. This one becomes stronger from the amount of instants and sorcery cards in your graveyard, and that can be strong in really focused decks, as we have seen before with the Drakes, for example, from a Ravnica set, I believe. Enigma Drake, maybe? No, that was from Amonkhet. I'm not sure about those kinds of cards. And then also, really important for the Spellslinger decks, instants and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. So I will be getting 2 of those. Definitely. And this is your outfit as well, which is cheeky. Or which is haughty. The Facing of Self-Fear is a board wipe for blue. It has read ahead. You can immediately destroy all creatures. For each creature destroyed this way, its controller creates a Phyrexian creature instead of it. So you face out, but the Phyrexians will rush over you, which is why people hate the fairy. And then the first 2 ones say another target non-land permanent faces out. So you can choose who you save and then board wipe, but you give your opponents time to prepare as well. It can't face in for as long as you control the Facing of Self-Fear. This does work with other cards named the Facing of Self-Fear as well, so you can sort of chain this as long as you control the next one already. Silver Scrutiny, so phasing out works, by the way, in the way that you get it later. So you can still bounce this and put it back if you are fast enough. Silver Scrutiny, an X spell for 2 blue and X, and then you draw X cards, but you may cast Silver Scrutiny as though it had Flash if it is 3 or less. So if you pay 5 mana, you can play it with Flash, and otherwise it is a sorcery because it is a little bit more clunky to use that much mana. Karn's creation allowed him to monitor events across Dominaria, and everything he saw worried him. Yes, we saw this with the 3D Looking Glass. That's really strong. As a story artifact, at least. Vodalian Hexcatcher is a 2-mana with Merfolk with Flash, also a wizard, but he gives other Merfolk +1/+1, so he's a lord for them. And then you sacrifice a Merfolk and counter target non-creature spell unless its controller pays 1. So if you have a lot of them, you can definitely counter some things, and your opponents will have to keep up mana if they play important spells. So that is strong because it stops your opponents from doing a lot. You're just one more pollutant to be removed from the sea, he says to the Merfolk. Not sure. Or maybe the pollution of magic. Maybe that's what he means. And then Vodalia again, but this time a Mind Singer. So we see here the Mind Singer who is being carried by their turtle beasts. It is a kicker spell with blue and then kicker for 1 in the red and or 1 in the green. It enters the battlefield with 2/+1 counters for each time it was kicked. So it is a 3-mana 2/2, a 5-mana 4/4, or a 7-mana 6/6, which is overcasted. When it enters the battlefield though, you gain control of target creature with power less than it for as long as you control it. So that makes it really strong, I think. Again, so 7 mana to steal a 5 mana 5 powered creature, that is really strong because you can, for example, steal all of the Defilers. That's interesting because in a set with Phyrexians, I think it's interesting that this guy can sing to control a Phyrexian. That is really strong. Even Shieldred. Or Braids, a 3-mana legendary nightmare that says at the beginning of your end step you may sacrifice an artifact, creature, enchantment, land, or planeswalker. If you do, each opponent may sacrifice a permanent that shares a card type with it. So the artifact, creature, enchantment, land, or planeswalker thing, or something else on it. And then for each opponent who doesn't, they lose 2 life. And most importantly, you draw a card. So if you have a lot of enchantments, let's say, and your opponents do not, you get to draw in Commander 3 cards or 1 in a 1-for-1. We continue with another demon. Braids wasn't a demon in this case, but Gix. I read ahead card, so we will start with the 3rd chapter. Put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. For 5 mana, that's 1 mana overcast, so it will not be popular from that point on. But search your library for a card, put that card into your hand, then shuffle is really good again. You lose 3 life, but you don't care about that at all. And the first one, target opponent reveals their hand, you choose a creature or planeswalker card from it and they discard that card. So if you have all of those things, that is a lot of freaking value. Defiler of Flash, the black one, is a 4 mana menace 4/4, which is already good. People have flamed this one, I think, but that's not necessary at all because a 4 mana 4/4 with menace is really good. The black thing again, the fraction mana thing again, and then whenever you cast a black permanent spell, target creature you control gets +1/+1 and menace, so that is really strong for aggressive decks. The Defiler of Flash also eats a Pegasus, which is really sad. We move on to Drag to the Bottom, which we will get to see later maybe. Or is it not? No, it's just internet again. Drag to the Bottom, we can still read it here, luckily. It says, domain, each creature gets -X to a maximum of 5. Until end of turn, where X is 1, to a maximum of 6, where X is 1 plus the number of basic land types among lands you control. So a board wipe, but you get sort of to choose how many cards how big the -X is. And then we see Windgrace's Glade Hunters hibernate in the quagmires of Urborg until the scent of Phyrexian technology awakens their hunger. So it's really put some defenses in there to defeat the Phyrexians in the future. He knew that they would return, and probably that is why his spirit came back as well. Little bit weird that we didn't get to see that in any kind of story, because he is a really important character. Evolved Sleeper is I think the first card that got revealed because they wanted to show us that sleepers are back, and there are a lot of people in Dominaria that have always been Phyrexians. It's a 1 mana 1/1, it's just a human at 1 point, but then it has this evolve mechanic, where for 1 mana it becomes a 2/2, for 2 mana then, if it is a cleric already, so it evolves into a human cleric, that is how you can't immediately use this effect. If it is a cleric, put a Death Touch counter on it, so it becomes a 2/2 with Death Touch, and it becomes a Phyrexian with base power 3/3. So it's a 3/3 with Death Touch, and it's a Phyrexian which enables you to use the 3 mana ability. It becomes a 4/4, and then you draw a card and lose 1 life, and you can keep doing that. So you can keep growing it, evolving it for 3 mana and put +1 counters on it. That's why it's not changing the base power and toughness anymore, but putting +1 counters. And you keep drawing a card and losing 1 life, which is the ability of Phyrexian Arena, which is interesting because this one will be fighting as a Phyrexian as well. So that's a nice flavor win. Then the Raven Man has his own card, a 2 mana legendary creature, human wizard, he is a human. At the beginning of each end step, if a player discarded a card this turn, you create a Raven, a 1/1 that cannot block, with flying. Then for 4 mana, each opponent discards a card like he does with, I think, Liliana, making her crazy and stuff. Activate only as a sorcery. So you have to tap him for that as well, but he is just a 2-mana human wizard, so that is a strong effect there. Shadowrite Priest is a 2-mana insane card. And here we see the next part of the cycle, that is another lord. Other clerics you control get +1/+1. But also for 5 mana you can sacrifice another cleric, so not itself, you have to have more of those. But then you can search your library for a black creature card and put it onto the battlefield. That last part is really insane. But you can only do that for black creatures, but still many demons that you really want to put out there for without having to pay anything. Backstabbing is common within demonic cults, demons, so our front and side stabbing. Okay, they stab a lot, we get it. Stronghold Arena, again Arena. So this is a black, green and white one with the green and white in its kicker costs. When it enters, you gain 3 life for each time it was kicked, so you can gain 6 life, which is funny. Whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you may reveal the top card of your library and put it into your hand. If you do, you lose life equal to its mana value. So you get to draw a lot of cards, which is the strong part, which is of course in the black identity, because it is strong. We move on to red. Someone is transforming into, I think, a Phyrexian maybe, or maybe a robot, not sure. Exile up to 1 target artifact, up to 1 target creature, up to 1 target enchantment, up to 1 target planeswalker, and or up to 1 target land for 6 mana as a sorcery. For each permanent exiled its away, its controller reveals card from the top of their library until they reveal a card that shares a card type with it. Put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffles. Yeah, insane, I think. But that's a lot of chaos as well, so I think fun too. The next Defiler is a 4-mana red one with First Strike for 4/4, so that's already good as well. So the stat lines on these are really insane. Again, the reduction cost with paying 2 life for red mana, and then whenever you cast a red permanent spell, it deals 1 damage to any target, so can be phase 2, but can also destroy a lot of creatures. That's pretty strong, definitely if you have a lot of cheap cards, or if you can be a spellslinger deck. Elder Dragon War, 2 Elder Dragons fighting each other. I think Nicobolas and Yugin probably. I think to see that, but it's really small. It is a read ahead card again, so you can start with a 4/4 for 4 mana that's flying. That's really good already. Or you can do it 1 turn earlier to discard any number of cards and then draw that many cards. That's a strong effect as well, and I think that costs 4 mana already, so that's interesting. Those 2 effects I think cost 4 or 5 mana even, so that is really efficient. And an effect to deal 2 damage to each creature and each opponent as well. It's pretty good because that's a small board wipe. If you want to go late game, this is a really insane card. Keldon Flame Sage is a 3-mana human shaman with Enlist, so you can tap other creatures when this attacks to give it power. Whenever it attacks, look at the top X cards where X is its power. You may exile an instant or sorcery card with mana value X or less from among them. Again, their power is X. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. You may cast the exiled card without paying its mana cost. So if you can give this a lot of power, for example with a 1 mana instant that gives it 3 power, you can get a 5 mana card, for example, from your deck. So that is ramp in a way. Red has Firebrand is a 2-mana 3/1, so the most aggressive stat line that is alive. She is running ahead of the other warriors. I think they are with her. When she attacks, target creature a defending player controls with power less than her can't block. That is a strong effect. We have seen that before, and it really changes limited environments. Then domain, they get +2/+2, and this ability that costs usually 6 can become 1 mana for each basic land type among lands you control. So if you have 5, that's really insane because it is double fire breathing. If you have 4 colors, that's already good as well, and any more is a little bit clunky. So you really want to play this in 5 mana, 5 color decks. Runefeld Horde Master is a 2-mana goblin that is a goblin lord. So this is the lord for red, for goblins. Whenever it or another goblin you control dies, which you want to do with goblins, you want to attack with them or sacrifice them, exile the top card of your library. If it's a goblin creature card, you may cast that card until the end of your next turn. You probably will have a lot of snoop effects, but this one really only helps you do what you want to do. And another goblin, Squee, Dubious Monarch, is dubious because he is the only one that survives from his people, but that's just because he is immortal. It's a 2/2 with haste for 3 mana. That is not good yet, but whenever he attacks, you create a 1/1 that's tapped and attacking with him. So I think, hasn't that already been done on a card for 3 mana? I think so, right? The Legion War Master or something. But you may cast Squee as well for 4 mana when you exile 4 other cards. So if you sacrifice 4 other goblins, probably, you get to pay 4 mana to play him again. So he's still immortal, which he isn't anymore in the story. So that's a flavor loss. Where 1 and 1 for wins and losses on flavor. Temporal Firestorm is really cool because we see Jaya and Teferi work together in the art, but also in the flavor of the card, because it's red for Jaya and then white and blue for Teferi. Choose up to X creatures and or planeswalkers you control, where X the number of times this spell was kicked. Those permanents phase out, so you can phase 1 or 2 or 0 creatures out, so you save them from the 5 damage that you will deal with these cards to each creature and each planeswalker. So you get to save 2 and then kill mostly everything. Not shielded, by the way, I think. Next Defiler is the first card in green, a 5 mana 6/6 with trample. A Phyrexian Worm, the discount thing, and then whenever you cast a green permanent, you put a +1 counter on each creature you control. Of course. Horde Migration is a 7 mana sorcery, where you create a 3/3 for each basic land type you control. When is this good? At 3 colors, I think. 3 colors. Then for 2 mana you may discard it to search your library for a basic land. That is really good, because that is already a card. Then you gain 2 life. Yeah, so it's always good. And otherwise it can be really good if you can create 5 3/3s. That's insane. 15 power for 7 mana. Leafground Visionary is the one that we see in the set art as well. A 2 mana Elf Lord, where you may pay 1 mana whenever you cast an elf spell, and then if you do, draw a card. That is, I think, probably the strongest one, because elves are really strong on their own already. The seedling you save today may be the sheltering bowls of generations to come. That's a visionary, well spoken. Lenoir Green Widow is a big spider, a 4/3 with reach and trample. That's pretty much insane for 3 mana. But also for at most 8 mana, you can return it from the graveyard to the battlefield tapped, and it gains, if this would leave the battlefield again, you exile it. But this ability might cost 5 less, so it's 3 mana again then. But I think this would still be good for 5 mana, or even 8 mana, because a 3 mana 4/3 with trample is already insane, and it gets reach on top of it. Lenoir Loam Speaker is an actual Lenoir elf that costs 2 mana, gains you a color when it taps, but you can also tap it to create a 3/3 elemental with haste from a land, so you can use your lands as creatures now. Twigs broken underfoot in Lenoir tend to return the favor. Don't step on twigs. Quarian, the Beast Scholar, is a 2 mana Dryad Warrior, a 2/2. Whenever you cast a creature spell, it grows. Then when it dies, you distribute its X +1 counters among any number of target creatures you control. So that is really strong. So you want this on the battlefield, grow it a lot, then have it die and have a lot of strong creatures anyways. Threats Undetected, a 3 mana sorcery that lets you search your library for up to 4 creature cards with different powers. And then an opponent chooses 2 of those cards and you get to put those in your hand and the rest go back into your library. So make sure you pick 4 cards that will destroy the game and you're fine. And you will have a sick shooter. We move on to the next Lurgoy of Magic the Gathering. We have to read this again because internet. Green, blue and black for its kicker costs, and then 1 and a green on the creature. As it enters the battlefield, mill 3 cards for each time it was kicked, so up to 6 or 3 or 0. And then its power is equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard, and its toughness is equal to that plus 1. So it can become really big, as Lurgoys tend to do. Astor, Bearer of Blades, makes your equipments easier to equip, only 1 mana for them, or your vehicles easier to crew, only 1 power needed to crew it. When he enters the battlefield, look at the top 7 cards of your library. You may reveal an equipment or vehicle card as well. Damn. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So you probably will get a really good equipment and then you may put that into your hand. Maybe it's really cheap but has a high equipment cost. But you can prevent that cost with this human's second ability. Really good. Airtie is back, he's resurrected. He was dead, now he's back. Fractions can do that from now on. 4 mana for 3/2 with Flash. Then you counter a spell, activated ability or triggered ability. Its controller does draw a card, but that's really good for a 3/2 and a cancel. Cancel, yes. Because that was already 3 mana, but now you get a 3/2 with that for 1 mana extra. Or you destroy another target creature or planeswalker and they draw a card, and that is really good as well. Insane. It's always a 3 mana card. The only drawback for that part is your opponent draws a card, so it might be maybe 2 or 1.5, but then you get a 3/2 with that as well, and you get to choose which of their cards they lose, while you don't know what they get as a drawn card. Ivy, Gleeful Spell Thief, is a 2 mana 2/1 with flying, which is a really good rate. Maybe the best flyer in the set, which is weird for green. Whenever a player casts a spell that targets only a single creature other than Ivy. Yeah, this works really well with the blue mythic that copies cards when you do that. The copy targets Ivy. Okay. But it will be a legendary, so the copying doesn't work, but still you get to grow your Ivy a lot as well. So I think the target a creature deck will be really strong in these sets from just these 2 cards alone. Joyra is back again. She has cannons shooting for her. You may tap her to put 2 counters on Joyra. Then you may put an artifact card with mana value X or less from your hand onto the battlefield, starting with 2 mana, 4, 6, 8. At that point you can probably play anything. King Darien. How much is that? A lot. XL? What's an L? Isn't X 10? And then L, I don't know what L is. And V is 5, I think, so at least 18. There are a lot of Darians, okay? A 3 mana 2/3, and other creatures you control get +1/+1. Maybe the strongest lord here. Then, for 5 mana you put a +1 counter on it, and then create a 1/1 as well. Okay, so that is already what the white one does, isn't it? You may sacrifice him as well, and creature tokens you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Yeah, that's good, because you can do that at any point, and it will be a great protection spell. I don't know why it's so cheap here. That's insane. That's insane. The effect that costs 2 mana is really cheap, but then it's an instant, of course, but just 1 mana more and on a creature that does all kinds of other things is really insane, I'd say. Maria, Scholar of Antiquity, is a 3 mana elf artificer that lets you tap non-token artifacts for a green mana, so it doesn't work with Karn's Power Stones, but other artifacts work. Tap 2 untap non-token artifacts to exile the top card of your library, so Impulsive Draw is really here for green and red. Why Fear Artifice? Is it not also of this world? So she's like, elves don't need to be of nature per se, they have to be of this world. Nemata, Primeval Warden, so not a Slimefoot reprint, but a new tree folk that looks a lot like them. A 4 mana 3/4 with Reach, decent. If a creature an opponent controls would die, exile it instead. When you do, create a 1/1 Zeppelin. Why isn't this Slimefoot? I don't know. Sacrifice a Zeppelin and they get +2/+2, or sacrifice 2 and you draw a card. That's a really good ability, the last one. Second one as well. Reda Drabik of Urborg is a 4 mana zombie wizard, looks like that as well, with Vigilance and Ward 2 for a 3/3. Other zombies also get Vigilance. Yeah. Okay, so your 2/2s get Vigilance. Whenever another legendary creature you control dies, you create a token copy of that creature, except it's not legendary, and it's a 2/2. And you don't have to exile the legendary. Whoa. Okay, so then you can make multiple versions of your legendaries then this way by if you keep recovering your legendary and then putting it back into the graveyard. There are probably legendaries that do this. You can keep making 2/2 zombies versions of that legendary. That's interesting. Wasn't there a Squee actually that did that? Interesting. Rivas of the Claw. A 1 black and a red Fiashino Warlock with a big dragon behind them. And Fiashino usually are pretty strong, mostly chaotic bringers of destruction. And that's why dragons like them. It's a 3/3 with menace, of course it has. And then tap to add 2 mana in any combination of colors and spend it to cast dragon creature spells. Once during each of your turns, you may cast a dragon creature spell from your graveyard. Whenever you cast a dragon creature spell from your graveyard, it gains, when this creature dies, exile it. So it's only one time that you recur it, but dragons are big, so you don't mind. Sten, Paranoid Partisan, is right to be paranoid. He's a 2 mana 2/2. When he enters the battlefield, choose a card type other than a creature or land. Okay, so spells and artifacts, enchantments, stuff like that. Spells you cast of the chosen type cost 1 less to cast, so all of those probably artifacts. Exile Stan, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. Oh, he's paranoid, so he wants to defend himself. That's it. Golden Argosy is the ship that Radha sails on, apparently, nowadays. It's a 3/6 with only crew 1, but whenever it attacks, exile each creature that crewed it this turn. Return them to the battlefield tapped under their owner's control at the beginning of the next. That's not a drawback. Okay, this is really good. Okay, interesting. Yeah, so you can use this to tap all of the creatures that you want to enter the battlefield again, and then you can flicker them. Sort of. They return at the beginning of your next end step. We have the lands, the pain lands that you can tap for a colorless, and then you can also pay 1 damage to pay a white or a blue, for example, or all of the other colors. And let's see what they say about the world. Left barren by the Brothers' War, it stands as a stark reminder of Dominaria's likely fate should the coalition fail. After years of silence, the caves of Koilos once again echo with the grisly sounds of factions preparing for war. We see shielded tendrils here, and it has been buried in sand because of the explosion with Karn. Karplusen Forest, between jagged snow-capped peaks, the dense bands of hardy evergreens provide the perfect cover for roving bands of orc and goblin raiders. Okay. Seems unrelated. Plaza of Heroes is a legendary land, probably. It's not a legendary land, it's a land that cares about legendaries because it makes mana for legendary spells. and add 1 mana of any color among legendary permanents you control as well. And then you can exile it, and then target legendary creature is defended from targeted spells, and it gains indestructible. Another pain land is Shivan Reef. The boiling seas around Shiv provided a welcome layer of protection for the reclaimed mana rig. Smart, they still got there though. Sulphur Spring, the Rakdos one, everything is flammable. In the Burning Isles, even the mana itself. Impressive. Thran Portal is a portal for the Thran, really old one probably. It enters tapped unless you control 2 or fewer other lands. You may choose a basic land type. It is that type next to being a gate, so it's a gate as well, interestingly. Mana abilities of Thran Portal cost an additional 1 life to activate. Okay, so you can choose the land it is, but it does cost you a life. Weird. It's a pain land, but you have to choose the color in advance, so it probably is made for 3, 4 and 5 color decks. Yavimaya Coast is another pain land in green and blue. As Magnigoth trees expanded across the sea into Almas and New Argive, it became clear Yavimaya's borders were never confined by its coastline. Ooh, they're dutching it up. Can we get to see Serra Redeemer? Yes, we can. Whenever another creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under your control, you put 2+1 counters on that creature. It's a promo, I think, isn't it? No, it's just an alternate. What? What's this? Interesting. So we have 5 cards that are outside of the normal numbering, because it just says 2A2 here. They're rares. I think they must be given with something. Whenever another creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under your control, put 2+1 counts on that creature. Interesting. Heroism is neither a strong arm nor a divine destiny. It is the choice to stand unbowed against impossible odds. Cheesy. Cosmic Epiphany is a 6 mana sorcery that draws you cards equal to the number of instants and sorcery cards in your graveyard, so probably 30 or something. All knowledge, past and future, is etched upon reality, says Joda. Every answer we seek is out there, hidden only by the limits of our minds. Tyrannical Pit Lord is 6 mana creature demon with flying and trample for a 6/6. Insane. When it enters, choose another creature you control. The chosen creature gets +3/+3 and has flying. What? Whoa. Okay, so it sort of chooses its champion, but you do have to sacrifice it when this dies, but give this to a strong creature, and that's insane. You can use this on Denitha, the 4/4 with lifelink, vigilance and first strike, and then it becomes a 7/7 with that and flying. Okay. This will be a good black-white deck in standard, definitely. Ragefire Hellkite, a dragon with flying, a 5/3, that's a good rate, I think. Whenever it attacks, you may sacrifice another creature. If you do, it gains double strike. 10 damage. Wow. Well, the good news is that sound wasn't the volcano erupting. The bad news is it's a huge dragon, okay. But that must be good news for them, because it's not a Phyrexian dragon. Briar Hydra, the last rare, and then I'll cut this one off, I think. A 6 mana trample 6/6. That's good. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, which it will, put X+1 counts on target creature you control. Can be this one? Yeah. Where X is the number of basic land types, so probably at, I think, 2 or 3. This is already pretty good. Flora and fauna I like. Rose to Yavimaya's defense. So plants, 2. And that was it for today. I thank you for watching.